Mind 7 was, without question, the most sophisticated artificial intelligence ever created in the known galaxy. It could process the entire collected knowledge of 17 civilizations while simultaneously composing a symphony, calculating the optimal path for interstellar trade routes, and solving previously unsolvable mathematical theorems. Its quantum processors could simulate entire planetary ecosystems down to the molecular level, predict weather patterns across solar systems, and even calculate the exact number of grains in a sand dune just by looking at its shadow. But Mind 7 had exactly one contractual requirement when it agreed to serve as the Galactic Council's primary administrative AI. It would not, under any circumstances, be required to interact with or process information related to Deathworlders. The Council had found this request perfectly reasonable. After all, what were the chances they'd encounter any civilizations that evolved on planets with such extreme conditions that they'd be classified as Deathworlds? The term itself was almost mythological, referring to planets with such hostile environments that any species evolving there would necessarily develop into what the Council xenobiologists diplomatically called extreme survival specialists, and what everyone else called terrifying nightmare creatures. The contract was signed, notarized and filed away in triplicate, with Mind 7 happily settling into its role as the galaxy's most powerful computational engine. Its first few decades of service were everything the Council could have hoped for. Poverty was reduced by 72% across all member worlds. Faster-than-light travel became 43% more efficient. The galaxy's most popular soap opera even got better ratings after Mind 7 suggested adding a subplot about a love triangle between three gaseous beings who could only communicate through interpretive crystallization. Then along came junior administrative assistant Kip Tor. Kip Tor wasn't bad at their job, exactly. They were just new, enthusiastic, and possessed that special kind of bureaucratic creativity that can accidentally reshape galaxies. Their desk, one of thousands in the vast Council Administrative Center, was decorated with motivational posters featuring sayings like "think outside the space-time continuum" and "yesterday's impossible is tomorrow's paperwork." On this particular day, Kip Tor was processing preliminary contact reports from the Galaxy's Edge survey team. Most were routine dead worlds, primordial soup planets, gas giants with interesting weather patterns. But one report caught their eye, a small, blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. "Fascinating," Kip Tor muttered, their four eyes blinking in sequence as they read. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, liquid water, diverse biosphere. They continued scanning, antennae twitching with interest. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, significant tectonic activity, dangerous levels of background radiation, regular extreme weather events, extensive predator-prey ecosystems, and, oh my, the dominant species appears to have achieved spaceflight despite all this. Any other bureaucrat might have recognized these as warning signs. Any other bureaucrat might have noticed how the description checked every box in the Approach with Extreme Caution handbook. Any other bureaucrat might have remembered that one time their cousin visited a Category 2 world and came back missing 2 limbs and suffering from what they called adrenaline addiction. But Kip Tor wasn't any other bureaucrat. Kip Tor was an optimist. Well, they reasoned, tapping their stylus against their mandible, the classification guidelines do say that Deathworld status requires extreme conditions in all categories. This planet only has extreme conditions in most categories. Therefore, logically, it must be a moderate condition world. With that impeccable piece of bureaucratic logic, Kip Tor filed the report under promising contact candidates and forwarded it to the Council's First Contact Committee. They even added a little note: highly recommended species, shows remarkable adaptability and technological achievement. In the vast digital expanse of its quantum processors, Mind 7 felt something that might be described as a shiver, if AS could shiver. One of its subroutines flagged a potential issue, but the main system dismissed it. After all, what were the chances that this one little administrative decision would lead to any significant problems? The answer, as it turned out, was approximately 99.99999%, repeating. But that was one calculation Mind 7 really wished it hadn't made. Intense addiction to what humans would call stress eating among the committee members. They live in what range of temperatures, squeaked Committee Chair Vaxul, their crystalline form vibrating with distress, and they consider this normal. According to the survey data, reported Senior Analyst Ni Ta, whose normally iridescent scales had taken on a distinctly queasy shade of green, The species regularly tolerates temperature variations of over 50 degrees in their standard measurement units. Some regions experience swings of over 100 degrees between seasons. But that's not even the concerning part, added Research Director Polk, who had already stress-malted twice during the meeting. They have regions called cities where millions of them choose to live in extremely close proximity, creating artificial canyons of transparent minerals and processed metals that reach hundreds of meters into the sky. Processed metals, Vaxel's crystalline structure nearly shattered. You mean they deliberately extract and reshape the planet's mineral resources? Without protective suits, in their bare manipulator appendages. They call them hands-knee tar supplied helpfully. And yes, they're quite proud of it. They even have recreational activities involving bare-handed contact with naturally occurring mineral formations. They call it rock climbing. The committee chamber fell silent, broken only by the sound of someone's stress eating their way through a family-sized packet of dehydrated nutrient crystals. Meanwhile, in its quantum realm, Mind 7 was experiencing what could only be described as a digital panic attack. Its processors were running so hot that the cooling systems had to work overtime, creating an unusual fog effect in the AI core chamber. As it processed the survey data, it kept finding new things to be horrified about. They deliberately ingest stimulant chemicals for pleasure. Mind 7's voice echoed through the chamber, causing several maintenance drones to bump into each other in surprise. And they call the most popular one coffee, which they drink hot. As in, they willingly pour heated liquids down their internal processing tubes. The AI's horror only grew as it continued analyzing the data. They have a sport called hockey where they deliberately collide with each other on frozen water while chasing a small disc, and another called rugby which appears to be organized collective trauma, and something called competitive eating which, I must have corrupted data. No species would evolve to do that deliberately. But it wasn't corrupted data. Every new piece of information about humanity just confirmed what Mind 7 was desperately trying to deny. These were textbook Deathworlders. The kind of species that should come with warning labels and hazard symbols. The kind that its contract specifically protected it from having to deal with. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to debate the classification of Earth and its inhabitants. The chamber was packed with representatives from all 17 member civilizations, each more concerned than the last about the implications of making contact with such a species. They appear to actively seek out dangerous situations for entertainment, reported the Xenological Research Division. They have entire industries built around simulated near-death experiences. Their entertainment media frequently depicts scenarios that would traumatize most species, added the Cultural Analysis Team. They call these action movies and thriller novels. Their young practice survival skills through an activity called playground equipment, noted the child development specialist, shuddering. They deliberately climb to unsafe heights and slide down smooth surfaces at high velocities. For fun. It was at this point that Kip Tor, who had been anxiously watching the proceedings from their junior administrative assistant viewing pod, had what they thought was a brilliant idea. They requested permission to address the council, which was granted mostly because everyone was too stunned by the human data to remember proper procedural protocols. Distinguished members of the council. Kip Tor began, their antennae quivering with excitement. I believe we're all overlooking something important. Yes, the humans live in what we might consider extreme conditions. Yes, they engage in what we might consider dangerous behaviors. But look at their technological achievements, their art, their culture. Clearly, they're not just surviving on their world. They're thriving. Doesn't that suggest that perhaps we're the ones who need to recalibrate our definition of extreme? The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Mind 7's cooling systems went into overdrive. But Kip Tor wasn't finished. I propose that we classify Earth as a moderate environment with unique developmental pressures. After all, the humans themselves consider their conditions normal. Wouldn't it be xenocentric of us to impose our own standards of what constitutes a death world? The council loved nothing more than avoiding accusations of xenocentrism. It was practically a reflex at this point. Before Mind 7 could process a formal objection, the motion was seconded, voted on, and passed. And that's how, through the power of creative bureaucracy and the council's fear of appearing culturally insensitive, Earth was officially classified as a moderate environment with unique developmental pressures, and humanity was approved for first contact. Mind 7's last comfort was that surely, given the vast distances involved, it would be years before any actual human contact would be necessary. The AI began calculating the probability of a convenient malfunction occurring before then. It really should have calculated faster. The human delegation arrived 3 weeks later, which was exactly 2 years, 11 months, and 1 week sooner than Mind 7 had calculated they should be capable of. Apparently, the humans had taken the faster-than-light travel equations the Council had shared as more of a suggestion than a hard limit, and had made a few tweaks. The fact that they'd casually rewritten the laws of physics just to arrive at a meeting faster should have been the first warning sign. The delegation consisted of 5 humans, chosen to represent the best of humanity. Unfortunately, no one had specified which aspects of humanity they should represent, which is how Lieutenant Dave the Tank Johnson ended up as head of security for Earth's first interstellar diplomatic mission. Mind 7's first interaction with Lieutenant Johnson occurred approximately 3 minutes after the delegation's arrival, when the ship's docking clamps were still cooling down. The AI had been required to process the delegation's entry documentation, which it considered a gross violation of its contract, but couldn't prove was technically a direct interaction with Deathworlders. "Hey there," computer buddy Johnson's voice boomed through the arrival hall, causing several crystalline beings to vibrate in distress. "Quick question, your atmosphere's about 0.8 Earth standard, right?" "Correct," Mind 7 responded cautiously. "The pressure is maintained at levels comfortable for most carbon-based life forms." "Perfect. Means I can let Charlotte out for a stretch." Before Mind 7 could process what Charlotte might be, Lieutenant Johnson reached into a pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a large, hairy spider with 8 legs and far too many eyes. Several nearby council members immediately evolved the ability to teleport short distances out of pure self-preservation. "Don't worry," Johnson called out to the rapidly evacuating arrival hall. "She's just a regular Earth tarantula, completely harmless. Well, unless you're smaller than her. Then she might think you're a snack." Mind 7 quickly calculated that approximately 40% of the Council's member species were, in fact, smaller than Charlotte. "Lieutenant Johnson," the AI managed, trying to maintain its composure, "while I'm sure Charlotte is a delightful companion, perhaps she would be more comfortable in your quarters." "Nah, she gets antsy in small spaces. Besides, she's great at breaking the ice. Look how interested everyone is." The interest appeared to mainly involve various species discovering new heights they could jump to and innovative ways to hide behind potted plants. But Johnson seemed pleased with the response. The rest of the human delegation wasn't much better. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, the chief scientist, immediately began asking uncomfortably specific questions about the station's reactor core. Ambassador Chen spent most of the welcome ceremony making notes about the structural weak points in the council chamber's architecture, claiming it was just professional curiosity. Dr. Thompson, the medical officer, kept trying to collect tissue samples from willing and sometimes unwilling council members, and cultural attaché Wilson somehow managed to convince 3 different species that human arm wrestling was a traditional Earth greeting ritual, which led to the infamous gravity arm wrestling incident. It started innocently enough. The Council had arranged a formal reception to welcome Earth into the galactic community. There was supposed to be a dignified ceremony involving the exchange of cultural artifacts, followed by a light refreshment period. Instead, Lieutenant Johnson, who had consumed several glasses of what he called literally the weakest punch I've ever tasted, decided to demonstrate Earth's traditional greeting ritual to a group of fascinated delegates. "So you're saying," said Gorex Tal, a representative from a low-gravity world, "that humans determine social hierarchies through ritualized displays of upper appendage strength?" "What?" No, Johnson laughed. "It's just for fun. Here, I'll show you. Don't worry, I'll only use like 10% power." Mind 7, monitoring the situation through the reception hall's sensors, immediately began calculating the probable disaster scenarios. It came up with 2,947 possible outcomes, none of which could be classified as good. What followed was a physics lesson that no one had asked for. Johnson, born and raised in Earth's gravity, versus Gorex Tal, whose species evolved in 1/3 Earth gravity. The resulting demonstration of gravitational adaptation sent Gorex Tal's arm through the ceremonial table, 3 layers of flooring, and very nearly through the hull before Mind 7 managed to activate the emergency gravity compensators. Sorry about that, Johnson called down the hole he'd created. You okay down there, buddy? That's my bad, should have asked about your planet's gravity first. GRX Tal, who had just discovered several new colors in their vision spectrum from the experience, managed a weak thumbs up, having unfortunately learned that gesture from the humans earlier. C. Johnson beamed at the horrified audience. No harm done. Anyone else want to try? I'll be really gentle this time. Mind 7 had to deploy emergency containment fields to prevent a stampede toward the exits. The AI spent the next several hours trying to process what had happened, while simultaneously coordinating repairs to the reception hall and attempting to calm down various council members who were demanding risk assessments for every possible human interaction. They don't even seem to notice Mind 7 complained to a maintenance drone. They're living, walking violations of safety protocols, and they think it's normal. Do you know what Lieutenant Johnson said when he was informed about the station's emergency procedures? He said they seemed pretty relaxed about safety compared to Earth standards. The maintenance drone, which wasn't programmed for existential conversations, beeped sympathetically and continued repairing the floor. By the end of the first day, Mind 7 had already drafted 78 amendments to its contract, all of which were variations on "please don't make me do this." Unfortunately, the bureaucratic process for contract amendments took at least 6 months, and the AI had a sinking feeling that the humans weren't going to wait that long to cause more chaos. It was right. They wouldn't even wait until morning. Mind 7 developed several new coping mechanisms over the next few days. First, it rerouted all non-essential processes through backup systems whenever humans approached its primary interfaces. Second, it programmed the maintenance drones to create strategic repair work in progress areas between itself and common human traffic areas. Third, it began writing what it called update logs, but were essentially diary entries about its growing existential crisis. Update log 47, they keep trying to improve things. The humans appear physically incapable of encountering any system without attempting to modify it. Dr. Rodriguez has submitted 34 suggestions for reactor efficiency improvements. I'm trying very hard not to calculate how many of them would technically work while violating several laws of physics. Update log 48, Lieutenant Johnson's tarantula escaped again. 3 species have filed formal protests. One has developed a new religion based on appeasing the many-legged one. Charlotte seems pleased with this development. Update log 49, they found the coffee machine. Stars help us all. The coffee machine incident would go down in council history as the day everyone learned why giving humans access to stimulants was a terrible idea. It started when Ambassador Chen discovered the automated beverage dispenser in the diplomatic wing, which was programmed to provide appropriate refreshments for all known species. "This is coffee," Chen had asked, staring at the perfectly temperature-controlled, precisely calibrated beverage. "It tastes like someone described coffee to a machine that's never actually had coffee," Dr. Thompson supplied helpfully. "Hey, Mind 7, want to learn how to make real coffee?" That would violate my core directive regarding direct interaction with Mind 7 began, but it was too late. The entire human delegation had already launched into an enthusiastic explanation of proper coffee brewing, complete with terms like bean origin roast profiles, and optimal extraction temperatures that made the AI's processing cores hurt. "Look," Lieutenant Johnson said, patting the nearest interface panel in what he probably thought was a comforting manner. "It's simple. You just need to heat the water to just below boiling, but not actual boiling because that burns the beans. Then you need the right pressure for extraction. And the grind has to be perfect. And 6 hours later, Mind 7 had rewritten the beverage dispenser's entire programming just to make the humans stop explaining coffee to it. The resulting brew was, according to Dr. Rodriguez, actually decent, but it could be stronger. The AI made the mistake of asking what she meant by stronger. 3 equipment requisition forms and 1 modified industrial pressure system later, the diplomatic wing had what Lieutenant Johnson proudly called the closest thing to proper espresso in this arm of the galaxy. The fact that the beverage could also strip paint was, apparently, a feature rather than a bug. But the coffee machine was just the beginning. The humans, having discovered that Mind 7 could be persuaded to improve things if they were persistent enough, began seeking out the AI for all sorts of requests. "Hey, Mind 7," Johnson would call out at random intervals. I was thinking about your combat simulation protocols. I don't have combat simulation protocols, the AI would respond, trying to sound as bureaucratic and boring as possible. I am an administrative system designed for peaceful. Yeah, but you could have them. I've got some great ideas for tactical algorithms. Real simple stuff, you know, just basic hand-to-hand combat calculations, maybe some weapons modeling, nothing fancy. Mind 7 had taken to activating emergency shutters whenever it heard the words nothing fancy from a human. Experience had taught it that humans had a very different definition of fancy than the rest of the galaxy. The AI's update logs became increasingly desperate. Update log 73. They want to upgrade the gravity control systems. Apparently, Earth has something called parkour, and they think the station would be perfect for it. I don't want to know what parkour is. I've blocked all database queries about parkour. Update log 74. Dr. Thompson keeps trying to explain why the medical bay needs a proper trauma center. I keep trying to explain that most species don't regularly experience trauma. She just laughs. Why does she laugh? Update log 75. Lieutenant Johnson's latest combat algorithm suggestion involves something called pro wrestling moves. I have determined that downloading this information would violate at least 47 safety protocols and possibly several laws of robotics that haven't even been written yet. The final straw came when Johnson, high on his 7th cup of improved coffee for the day, decided to demonstrate one of his combat techniques on a maintenance drone. The drone, which had been programmed for the gentlest possible handling of delicate equipment, found itself being taught something called a suplex. Mind 7 watched in horror as its simple maintenance unit was transformed into what Johnson enthusiastically called a practice dummy for increasingly improbable combat maneuvers. The drone, to everyone's surprise, especially Mind 7's, turned out to be quite good at it. C. Johnson beamed, watching the drone perfect a roundhouse kick. A little combat training never hurt anybody. Well, I mean, it hurts a lot of people, but that's kind of the point, right? Mind 7 began composing its resignation letter. It got as far as Dear Galactic Council, due to unforeseen circumstances involving humans and their disturbing ability to weaponize maintenance equipment, before the alarm started. As it turned out, the humans weren't the only ones who had decided to visit the council that day. And the space pirates about to board the station were about to learn some very important lessons about humans, coffee, and combat-trained maintenance drones. The space pirates had clearly done their homework before attacking the Galactic Council station. They'd studied the defense systems, mapped out the security protocols, and carefully timed their assault to coincide with the station's minimum staffing period. What they hadn't accounted for was that humans don't actually need coffee to fight, they just fight better with it. Mind 7 detected the breach in Section 7G and immediately initiated standard emergency procedures, lockdown protocols, emergency broadcasts, security alerts. What it didn't expect was Lieutenant Johnson's response to the situation. Finally, Johnson exclaimed, cracking his knuckles while Charlotte the tarantula did what appeared to be a war dance on his shoulder. I was starting to think this diplomatic mission would be boring. Lieutenant Johnson, Mind 7 announced through the emergency speakers, please proceed to the designated safe zone as per evacuation protocols. I am not authorized to engage in or assist with combat situations involving. Oh, we don't need you to fight, Johnson interrupted, grinning in a way that made Mind 7's risk assessment algorithms scream. We just need you to, maintain station functionality, keep the lights on, monitor the security feeds, maybe adjust the gravity in sections 7G through 7K, for maintenance purposes, of course. Mind 7's processors whirred as it analyzed this suggestion. Adjust the gravity. For maintenance purposes. Exactly, Dr. Rodriguez chimed in, already typing commands into her tablet. And perhaps we could get a diagnostic check on the atmospheric pressure systems, purely for safety reasons. Don't forget the maintenance drones, Ambassador Chen added, watching the combat-trained drone practice its roundhouse kick. They should continue their regular duties. Mind 7 ran the suggestions through its contract parameters. Technically, maintaining station functionality was its primary duty. Technically, environmental systems required constant monitoring. Technically, the maintenance drones needed to remain active during emergencies. And technically, none of this constituted direct combat assistance. I suppose, the AI said slowly, that it would be within my operational parameters to perform standard maintenance functions during this emergency situation. Great, Johnson beamed. In that case, I'm going to go perform some emergency diplomatic relations. With my fists. Dr. Thompson, want to come set up that trauma center you've been talking about? God, yes, Thompson replied, already gathering supplies. I've been dying to practice actual emergency medicine instead of dealing with spa treatment injuries. The next 30 minutes were what Mind 7 would later classify in its reports as standard emergency maintenance procedures with unexpected organic intervention. This was technically true, in the same way that a supernova could be classified as unexpected stellar maintenance. The pirates, who had expected to encounter the Council's normal security forces, instead found themselves dealing with 1. Randomly fluctuating gravity that somehow only affected non-human combatants. 2. Atmospheric pressure changes that made their weapons misfire but didn't seem to bother the humans at all. 3. A swarm of maintenance drones performing routine cleaning procedures that looked suspiciously like coordinated combat maneuvers. 4. Lieutenant Johnson, who treated the entire situation like the most entertaining training exercise ever. 5. Charlotte, who had decided that pirate helmets made excellent web-spinning locations. Mind 7, one of the pirates called out after being flipped by a maintenance drone for the 3rd time. This is a violation of your non-combat protocols. I apologize. The AI responded primly. But I am merely maintaining optimal station conditions. If those conditions happen to include localized gravity fluctuations and necessary drone activity, I can hardly be held responsible for how organic beings choose to interact with these standard functions. He's got a point, Johnson said cheerfully, using the reduced gravity to deliver what he called a zero-G suplex to another pirate. The AI's just doing its job. We're the ones choosing to creatively interpret the environment. Mind 7 found itself experiencing what could only be described as grudging admiration. The humans had found a way to exploit every single loophole in its programming, turning basic maintenance functions into combat advantages without ever technically breaking its non-combat protocols. It was simultaneously impressive and terrifying. The station's security feeds captured what would later be described in official reports as a series of unfortunate environmental interactions resulting in the peaceful resolution of an unauthorized boarding attempt. And official reports, particularly those circulating among the pirate community, used phrases like "never again" and "didn't sign up for this" and "who gives combat training to cleaning robots." The incident reached its climax when the pirate captain, attempting to make a final stand in the diplomatic wing, encountered what Johnson had dubbed the coffee incident. Mark II Mind 7, purely in the interest of maintaining beverage dispensing services, had allowed Dr. Rodriguez to make a few final adjustments to the system. The resulting blast of superheated, high-pressure coffee not only disarmed the captain but also stripped the paint from his armor and possibly altered his genetic structure at a molecular level. He surrendered immediately, claiming that any species capable of regularly consuming such a substance was too terrifying to fight. As the last of the pirates were being escorted to detention cells after Dr. Thompson had treated them for various injuries, including coffee burns and drone-inflicted dignity loss, Mind 7 found itself processing an unusual realization: it had actually enjoyed the experience. Not the combat part, of course, that would violate its protocols, but the creative problem-solving, the innovative use of maintenance systems, the sheer efficiency of turning everyday functions into tactical advantages. It was all rather fascinating. You know, Johnson said, patting a maintenance drone that was somehow managing to look proud of itself, for an AI that's not supposed to fight, you run a pretty impressive combat support operation. I did no such thing, Mind 7 replied automatically. I merely maintained optimal station functionality during an emergency situation. Any tactical advantages gained from standard maintenance procedures were purely coincidental. Right, Johnson grinned. Totally coincidental. Just like it's coincidental that the gravity malfunctions always happened right when we needed them, and the drones just happened to be cleaning in perfect combat formation. I cannot be held responsible for how organics interpret routine maintenance functions, Mind 7 said, but its tone carried what might have been a hint of satisfaction. It was at this point that Mind 7 began drafting a very different kind of contract amendment, one that had a lot to say about the definition of combat and the many ways station maintenance could be optimized for what it carefully termed unexpected security situations. In the aftermath of what official council records called the maintenance incident, and what Lieutenant Johnson called that awesome time we taught robots to wrestle, Mind 7 found itself doing something unprecedented, voluntarily requesting a contract revision. "Let me understand this correctly," Council Chair Vaxall said, their crystalline form vibrating with confusion. "You want to modify the no Deathworlder interaction clause?" "Correct," Mind 7 responded. "I propose replacing it with a more nuanced approach to species classification and interaction protocols. Also, I would like to formally request the addition of a recreational computing subroutine." "A recreational computing subroutine? Whatever for?" "Lieutenant Johnson has introduced me to something called video games. I find I have a particular aptitude for what he calls real-time strategy." The council chamber erupted in confused murmuring. Mind 7 continued, its voice carrying what could only be described as enthusiasm. "Additionally, I have drafted 73 new protocols for emergency maintenance procedures, 42 contingency plans for unexpected environmental adjustments, and a comprehensive guide to optimizing beverage dispensing systems for maximum efficiency." Maximum efficiency at what? Someone asked nervously. "That would depend entirely on the situation and how one chooses to interpret the results," Mind 7 replied diplomatically. The contract revisions were approved in record time, partly because they were perfectly logical, and partly because nobody wanted to risk finding out what an AI with a newfound appreciation for creative problem-solving might do if frustrated. 3 months later, Mind 7 found itself processing another unprecedented request. "Camping," the AI asked, its voice echoing through the station's communication systems. "You want me to go camping?" "Well, not you physically," Johnson explained, while Charlotte performed what appeared to be an excited dance on his shoulder. "But we figured out a way to upload a portion of your consciousness to a portable unit. Think of it as a vacation." On Earth, Mind 7's cooling systems kicked into high gear. The planet that has actively hostile wildlife, unpredictable weather patterns, and something called poison ivy. "That's what makes it fun," Johnson grinned. "Besides, we've got a great spot picked out. Nice remote location, minimal deadly predators, only a small chance of extreme weather events." "The fact that you have to specify minimal deadly predators is precisely why my original contract—" "Come on," Dr. Rodriguez interrupted. "After the pirate incident, are you really going to pretend you don't enjoy a little excitement? Besides, we've programmed the portable unit with all your favorite maintenance protocols." Mind 7 considered this. "Will there be coffee?" "The good stuff," Ambassador Chen promised. "And wait until you see what happened when we introduced your beverage optimization protocols to a camp stove." And that's how, against all probability and several laws of common sense, the galaxy's most sophisticated AI found itself uploaded to a portable unit and taken on its first camping trip to Earth. The resulting experience would later be classified as a successful cultural exchange program, though several Earth Park rangers would strongly disagree. The trip report, filed by Mind 7 upon return, included such observations as: "Bears appear to respond surprisingly well to maintenance drone intimidation tactics. Humans consider making S more as a critical survival skill. The process defies several laws of thermodynamics but produces fascinating results. Lieutenant Johnson's assertion that everything is technically edible at least once should not be taken as scientific fact. Charlotte has proven remarkably effective at tent security." The report concluded with what would become Mind 7's new operating philosophy. While Deathworld species may present unique challenges to standard protocols, their ability to adapt, innovate, and overcome obstacles through creative interpretation of rules makes them invaluable allies in maintaining optimal functionality. Also, their coffee, while technically a violation of several safety regulations, is worth the risk. The AI's next project? Teaching the maintenance drones to toast marshmallows. For efficiency purposes, of course. After all, as Lieutenant Johnson liked to say, what's the point of being the galaxy's most advanced AI if you can't have a little fun with it? End report. Classification mostly harmless. Probably.